introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, first of all, hello everyone. Thank you all for joining. My name is Chen. I'm the co-president of Blockchain at USC. Blockchain at USC is basically a student-run organization at USC that's trying to facilitate the conversations for either student members, alums, and industry professionals around the blockchain technology and whatever that's happening with the space. And I know there's a lot happening in space each and every day, and everyone has their own interests and verticals. But right now with the club, we're just going to have a wide spectrum of interest and people that are interested in space to have conversations, to get connections with the industry. So today we're very happy to be joined by three fantastic speakers from Dragonfly Capital and Grab Games. And right now I'm happily handing it over to Richard to do a little introduction.
Hi, everyone. My name is Richard. I'm currently a junior at USC studying philosophy and economics. I'm the director of external relations at Blockchain USC. Again, super happy to have invited Mia, Hans, and Andy to this event. And now we'll start with the event with some introductions for the guests and also with our moderator questions. We understand that our audience members are usually very eager to ask your own questions, which is why we'll be leaving some time towards the end for you to ask your own. So please feel free to raise your hand at the end of the event when we indicate, so you can ask your own questions. So we'll start by introducing Mia a little bit to our audience. Mia is a partner at Dragonfly Capital, a leading crypto native venture capital firm that invests across sectors and borders within Web3, with more than $2 billion in assets under management. Dragonfly's portfolio includes Avalanche, DYDX, 1inch, bybit, Compound, Cosmos, Dune Analytics, Maker, Flashbots, Gem, Ancient 8, Near, and many, many more. Mia has extensive experience in both Web2 and Web3. In Web2, Mia has been at the forefront of the bike sharing economy in China, working at Mobike, which was later acquired by Meituan for $2.7 billion. Her time at Mobike was the only 2 years that Mia has spent in Web2 before fully diving into Web3. Later, she joined Ember Group as a founding member. Ember is a crypto unicorn company, a leader in digital assets trading, products, and infrastructure. Now at Dragonfly Capital, Mia invests across sectors like GameFi, metaverse, NFTs, DAOs, creator economy, and more. We're very, very fortunate to have Mia join us today.
Thank you, Richard. Very kind of you. And hey, everyone. I'm very excited to share my journey with you guys.
Thank you for joining us, Mia. And here's a little introduction about our other two guests, Hans and Andy. So Hans graduated from USC back in 2007, where he majored in interactive entertainment. From there on, he went on to work in video game industry and is currently the COO at Grab Games. And here we have Andy. Andy also graduated from USC back in 2013, where he majored in computer science with specific focus on video games. He spent some time working in the mobile and ad tech industry, and now he's the CTO at Grab Labs. Grab has been working on interactivity around live streaming and strategic gaming related initiatives like blockchain games since 2016, and is continuing to explore new ways to innovate around this new technology. So welcome, Hans and Andy, and maybe we can start by asking some introductory questions with you guys.
Yeah. So for Mia, you have extensive experience both in Web2 and Web3 before joining Dragonfly. In fact, you have been an early contributor to every single industry that you have been a part of. To start, could you please briefly talk about your previous work experiences and what led you to Web3 and now to Dragonfly?
Yeah, absolutely. So I wouldn't say I'm an early contributor in Web2, because Web2 probably technically started in the 90s and I was born in the 90s. But yeah, I think my journey has been like, I guess, crafting a thesis that I've since, teenage years and young. I'm from Beijing and I moved to California when I was 16. I did high school actually in Santa Cruz and then left for college in the East Coast in Connecticut. So growing up, I'm broadly interested in two things, and underlying thesis is like, how do I be the bridge? So number one is being the bridge between the East and West. So I think, as Chinese native who, had gone abroad and had quite some years in the US, and think about how the current, geodynamics and general, especially manifest in technology, how Asia and West sort of intersect. And secondly is want to be the bridge between humanity and technology. So that's why I picked my major as computer science and psychology at Wesleyan, a liberal arts college in Connecticut. So I think, yeah, following that thesis, in 2017, I was scheduled to graduate in May 2017, but then I decided to take on a gap year in January. And that's when I joined Mobike, which is this bike share company based in China. I think that really is one of the first companies that caught my eye and is that, wow, this is actually, really manifested the thesis that I was thinking for myself. Mobike is a China native company doing something that's, for the first time, I think, historically we've sort of felt China is mostly like copying Silicon Valley, but then really this time you're seeing how that narrative is shifted. And secondly, it is about enabling the better, leveraging technology and mass adoption to create impact. So that was when I joined, and Mobike was still quite a small startup back then, and but the story didn't turn out to be how I wanted to be. I don't know how much you guys follow the story, but essentially a lot of the venture capital and funding pour into the sector because it became quite hot. And then Mobike and with its biggest competitor called OFO became sort of like the darlings of the venture capital world. So this is what we said. There's a business called 2C, there's 2B business, and there's the 2VC business, right? So the 2VC business is basically like seeing how like it's really a race to the bottom or like a race to exit, right? So and the easiest way to really beef up the company's valuation and traction is really just like put more bikes on the street, hoping that more people ride them, and subsidize user quite a bit, and then hoping that one of the big data conglomerates like Alibaba or Tencent will buy them. And so that was like what was going on. So ended up I felt like we created Mobike created more trash than positive net impact to the world. So seeing there, I was building products and shipping, and for I think we had like 20 million trips a day. It was growing really, really fast. But as a product manager, then I really saw how like the Web2 architecture and operating under this broader umbrella is really about making the big guys bigger, right? And so what ended up happening is like I think Meituan, right? It's a O2O super app based in Asia, acquired Mobike. And then so like Alibaba also invested in these in the sector, thinking that it's going to be just another data and user acquisition funnel for them. So seeing that, like I thought for myself, like as a young person, right, like I feel like I really want to be in an industry of our time, and I thought that was technology, and that's why I dived into Web2, and that was the most evident tech narrative back then, right, back in 2017. And seeing that and seeing how the basically the power structure and technology structure shifted, and I just didn't feel like that was the hustle of our generation, right? So thinking that, I started looking elsewhere, and that's when I don't know how much you guys were following 2017. There was the ICO wave, and there's a lot of the Wild West, and I was in China back then, and a lot of like people coming up doing this like decentralizing Uber, Twitter, like a lot of nonsensical stuff. But then I felt that energy, right? Like there's like a Wild West, like frontier energy that I was really sensing on the ground, and that's when I studied the Bitcoin white paper, and really it just clicked to me that this is a next fundamental civilizational shifting technology that I want to bet my entire career on. So yeah, late 2017, I started, going to like crypto meetups and conferences in Asia. And that's when I met the founder of Amber Group. There were like 6 people. There were like 6 Morgan Stanley traders from Hong Kong. And then there were like doing this like AI for AI trading for like equities startup before, and then they started to say, oh, crypto is actually this new asset class that has a huge amount of inefficiencies, and it's like there's all these like weird like exchange WebSocket like APIs that like only a crypto native team can really leverage on. So they were like, we're gonna build a Renaissance technology of crypto. And so then I was thinking like, wow, like the decentralization of everything, I don't think we're ready for that yet. But what is for sure ready is that there's a ton of asset that's starting to get poured into the market. And if there's asset, there's going to be volatility, right? So I didn't want to bet on a particular coin to go up or down, or this like product is going to work or not. Like, to be frank, most of the product to me, it didn't seem that it was going to work, other than like Bitcoin made sense. So I was like, wow, I built betting on a company that is basically the entire bread and butter is riding off of the trading and the volatility of crypto assets. It makes sense. So that's when I joined them as their head of business development in Shenzhen and Hong Kong in 2018. So yeah, and then I think the first quarter of 2018 is when Bitcoin plunged quite a bit, but because Amber was doing this market neutral, high frequency like trading strategy for their quant fund, actually went up like 30% the first quarter, which is like really set apart from a lot of other players back then. So yeah, gradually the company now is 900 people, $3 billion company. But I think being early, seeing how that first gen of like, we call that CFI, centralized finance counterpart to DeFi company gets built out, and then really plugged myself into the Asia crypto ecosystem, further made me realize that crypto is global from day one, right? Like there's no American or Chinese Bitcoin. There's just like Bitcoin is the world's Bitcoin. It's just different plugs on the ground that are built differently. And that really further, was like, this is what I said I wanted to do. I wanted to be the bridge between the East and West. I wanted to be the bridge between humanity and technology. And I just somehow bumped into the perfect industry, and then just never been able to look back ever since. So yeah, and then Dragonfly started in mid 2018, and our first fund was 100 million. And within like a couple months, I got connected to the founder, Bo. He's kind of brought venture capital in China in the 90s, and he was telling me how his vision of building this East meets West like crypto native venture fund. I was like, wow, that actually made a ton of sense. Again, it's just, I think it's, and then I joined them as the first member on the team in January 2019. And yeah, so I think to summarize, I feel like I've always had a thesis in my mind, and it's just really a matter of pursuing them and putting myself into the flow, and then changing directions when you don't think things are going right direction, but I think at the end of the day, it's really about being in the flow. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Mia. I think that was a great overview of your story, your journey, and also I think for the crypto industry as a whole, because a lot of us started out as speculators, just want to grow our bags, and then as time goes on, there are a lot of fundamental infrastructures that are being built out, and right now we're having a lot of narratives on the GameFi space, and then with the play to earn metaverse space. With the blow up of NFTs, right? So today we're also joined with a very expert game development team from Grabs. So Andy and Hans, maybe can you guys talk us through like what, because you guys are both from USC and USC has a great gaming school. Maybe you guys can talk about like what your journeys were that led you to Grab, and what's the blockchain initiative that you guys are working on recently.
Yeah, so I guess I can get started on my journey. So as soon as I came into USC back in 2002, I believe Anthony Borquez, who still teaches in the entrepreneurial school now, he started the first video game class, my first semester at USC. So as a freshman, I was fortunate enough to find out about that in registration, and then I took that class immediately because I always knew I wanted to get into the video game industry somehow. So from there, every semester after that class was so successful, they kept adding additional classes. So the next semester there was 3 classes, then the next semester there was 7 classes, then there was a minor, then there was a major, then there was a master's and a PhD. Now it's like the whole curriculum that you guys are aware of now. So on my end, I was heavily involved in that program from teacher's assistant to just helping with curriculum structures. And Anthony at the same time was big in technology, and he had a startup that was focusing on feature phones at the time. So um, I ended up interning there and working there for a while. We were just developing games for the old Nokias and Razor phones and things like that. And the mantra for that group has always just been trying to take technology, um, just cutting edge technology, and see how we can use those things and provide new fun use cases for all of that. So we were really, really early on the mobile gaming side, and it was a rough time, just developing for all these different smartphones, not even smartphones, feature phones, because feature phones didn't really have a standard. So you're making unique experiences for very different phones. But that company got acquired by Konami Digital Entertainment. If you guys are familiar with Konami, they made games like Dance Dance Revolution. I'm sure you guys know that. But at that point, we started to venture into the early days of smartphone development. So really early there, um, figuring out that whole landscape as that was rapidly growing. And in the midst of that, there was also the whole social gaming space that started to emerge there. So we were very early on those two fronts, and just we after leaving Grab, we started after leaving Konami, we started Grab Games back in 2009. And at that point, we were really focused on social and mobile, but the next venture for us was getting into the mixed reality space with VR and AR. So we were extremely early there as well. But one of the things that our team really loves to do is to just be on that forefront and just figuring out what the standards are, figuring out what the use cases are, figuring out how we can take these new paths and mold them into things that people are familiar with, but also show them things that they've never seen before. So currently, we've been developing several different titles on the AR and VR side, but in the midst of that development, things started to really cook up on the blockchain crypto side, as Mia mentioned in her overview. But for us, we're always looking at emerging tech and how it applies to games. Like what can we do, taking this new technology to enhance just the things that we do on the gaming side. So we're working on several different projects, one of which was done on the EOS side of things, pretty early, but there was a lot of learnings there, and we've since pivoted a bit to focus on other use cases as well as AR and VR. But then now things are coming full circle to where we're seeing emerging huge interest around things like the metaverse and everything, where all of these aspects that we've had our hands in are now starting to come into one complete thing where everything kind of supports each other to create this new experience that people are working towards. So it's extremely exciting for us. And I'll hand it to Andy. I know I probably covered some things that overlap with him, but I'm sure he has some specific things for him that he can go over.
Yeah, by the time I met Hans, maybe a decade ago, it was clear that our fates had kind of intertwined a bit. So the class that he was in that ended up turning into a handful of majors and whatnot, by the time I got to USC, was the #1 kind of video game major in the nation. kind of split into two sides, a more design-oriented side and a more computer science-oriented side. Half of my classes were cinema school, the other half were computer science, with some ITP classes peppered in, where kind of I ended up meeting Anthony. Similar to Hans, was a TA for Anthony for several years. Similar to Hans, got poached out of USC to one of Anthony's companies. That company was Grab Games. So my time at USC was a lot of low-level programming, graphics, network programming, the beginnings of Unreal and the beginnings of Unity becoming major kind of engine players. Additionally, some of the initial development with regards to video game or video card programming. CUDA was introduced, I believe, in 2010 or so. And so now you're able to kind of do a lot of parallelization with the GPU cores. And so very much low level there. Went to Grab Games and worked on those same mobile games, social games, with regards to things like Farmville, but maybe not necessarily targeted towards the 35 to 42-year-old women, but in that space kind of very clearly. Around that time, maybe 2013, we had so much internal tooling with regards to analytics and kind of ad tech for mobile attribution, driving people into games, tracking that, that we actually split up a separate company from Grab Games, which is now Grab Labs. So kind of put my game development hat up on the rack and started doing a lot of ad tech, all sorts of things, dealing with much bigger scale than we had previously, dealing with Twitter, dealing with Facebook and Google. And that was a lot of fun. Something that kind of, speaking of kind of mantras that I kept through that, was always being video game adjacent though. Played a lot of video games as a kid. My first programming was writing hacks for a game called Delta Force 2, maybe about 4th grade. And so I've always loved games, but kind of been a generalist programmer. So when we saw the rise of people watching video games and what video meant, even in the ad tech industry, aside from video games, that was really cool to watch. Then you see esports getting big, and we worked together with Twitch over the past 3-4 years to build kind of advertisements, but also esports leagues on top of the streaming. So going beyond single player games, going beyond multiplayer PvP games, trying to decide how do you have 30,000, 100,000 people watching one person play a game and be a part of that community and affect the game they're playing. And that's what has been really exciting over the past few years. Some of this is tying into some of the blockchain stuff we're doing now, where our initial foray into it was betting, wagering, not really community centric. The game itself didn't really matter if you're betting high or low. And so play to earn hadn't really kind of popped up yet. Now we're really excited with things like play to earn, the fact that the community that's playing games is massive. That we can go and build some of the games that we're more accustomed to building in a way that benefits gamers and kind of crypto enthusiasts alike. So yeah, really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your awesome introductions. I think Hans and Andy, it's very evident that you two have seen how the game industry transforms across different technology mediums. You talked about making games for feature phones and all the way to AR, VR. And for Mia, you are talking to GameFi founders every single day. You've truly become a key opinion leader whom a lot of founders go to for advice in the space. So for all three of you, what aspects of GameFi in particular are you most excited about? And what aspects do you still think still needs more proof of concept to convince you of their long-term viability? Maybe we can start with Mia and then to Andy and then to Hans to answer this question.
Yeah, so obviously I think the play to earn, I think the really puts the premise of like, can we do what we love and for a living? I think that's the biggest sort of primitive that emerged in this new paradigm shift. And I think that, given the success of, the early success signs of Axie, right? Like, a lot of the developers are starting to look in to this sector and see how can we make a better Axie or something that, how do we really incorporate this, economic or, fundamental technology into the games themselves. So I think that from seeing and talking to a ton of founders in this space, I think there's definitely still questions left out to be answered. I think the most evident is like, how do you really build a sustainable economic ecosystem within the games, and what are the games are truly suited for plugging into crypto. So yeah, I would say that is the, I think that the light at the end of the tunnel is there and everybody's heading towards. It is a matter of like, how do we get there? And I hand it to Hans and Andy to, since they're experts in the industry, to get their thoughts on that.
Hey, yeah, thank you. Definitely agree with what you said. The play to earn aspect, I think, is really cool. I remember the first game I fell in love with. It's no longer big in the United States, but is still kind of globally recognized. It was a Korean MMO called Lineage. Very grindy, very slow feedback cycles, very unforgiving. But it had this aspect of each little bit you put in, the more you get out. Years and years of playing that game, you see these little economies of folks playing the game, selling items within the game to make a living. Something that I think is really cool about GameFi is the ability to kind of take that aspect back into control of the companies themselves, to do it in a responsible way. We're not looking to take advantage of anyone or for other people to take advantage of people with what we build. So how do we build good feedback cycles so that everyone's playing is having fun? There's no crazy farming or anything like that. So I think that's super interesting. Something more tied to kind of traditional video games that I think is interesting is the fact that everything is kind of being put into a marketplace. And when you have a marketplace, there's a lot of kind of concerns that can kind of pop up. I think a handful of us remember when Diablo 3 introduced the real money auction house. A lot of fun, a lot of utility. I made money doing it. That was awesome. There was a downside, though, that it allowed actually skipping content within the game rather than improving the game by having the cooler items. So I think as we think about balancing things, it's not just how do we avoid the initial mistakes that Axie Infinity made, but then kind of solved with renting and whatnot, but how do we balance it from a more holistic aspect? So that's really exciting. Probably need to hire a team of people to do it, but any problem we're solving, right?
Yeah, and I'll just add to Andy and Mia's points. Like it's really clear that this is where things are trending, but the issue is whenever there's these kind of big shifts, there's the early adopters that understand the potential, but then the bigger general public that don't understand anything of this, that would need to be brought on board in a way that is digestible. So an example being microtransactions was a big shift that happened that was shepherded by the mobile industry. But that was something that was met with a ton of resistance from gamers that are used to things being a certain way. I go to the store, I buy a game for $60, and then that's it. I don't have to worry about spending any more money. But it took some time, and it took a lot of quality games on the mobile side to give enough data to show, hey, this is sustainable and it cannot be predatory as well. So just being able to figure out what that balance is and what the new genres that actually take full advantage of crypto are, because there's going to be new new genres that are going to need to be created that really realize this top to bottom. Right now, we're trying to fit this new economic system into things that we're already familiar with. So part of the challenge and fun is just figuring out new use cases.
Yeah, I think those were terrific answers on Richard's problem on questions on GameFi space. And another thing that like Hansen mentioned is with a lot of early adopters, they might not have come in at the right moment, at the right market timing, which might be what we're seeing right now, right? We like, just like what Mia said, there are a lot of 2 VC projects in the GameFi space and two investor side projects in the GameFi space where people are over concerned with designing tokenomics and not much effort is being put into the actual game development. So I guess from that point on, my question would be, so AR and VR is also a very new and sector that has yet to be discovered in the game industry, and it's not as scaled as the mobile gaming and the PC gaming industry. So my question would be, for me on investor side, when you're looking at innovative projects like Grab, and for developers like Hans and Andy, what are your approach onto bringing new users, onboarding new users onto some products that they are not familiar with? What are your strategies in that?
I guess I can start this time and then I'll hand it to you guys. So one of the biggest challenges that we had with VR and to a lesser extent AR, you really have to experience it firsthand to understand how different it is from what you're normally used to playing or viewing. And so in early development times, we were really trying to figure out how can we I'm not sure if you guys have seen mixed reality videos where it kind of shows a person inside of a virtual world in the way that they would see it. But that was something that came out of necessity because being able to share a trailer on YouTube for your game, you have to come up with creative ways to get people to experience what VR potentially can be. And we're seeing a lot of parallels with that with crypto now, where trying to figure out what is the simplest way that we can explain this to a layperson that will get them excited and interested to actually participate. So it's still something that we're I don't want to say struggling with, but we're really working. We're putting a lot of effort into that on the VR and AR side, and I think it's a group effort across all VR AR content creators, where we all stand to benefit if we figure this problem out. So as more and more headsets start to get out into the wild and more people can do in-person experiences, that will continue to get better. And I feel like on the crypto side, as it starts to bleed into more of the mainstream and more people are able to use it in things that they may or may not be aware of, it'll start to take hold on that front as well.
Yeah, I strongly hold the belief that technology should be in the background. It should be like, seamless, and people shouldn't have need to understand what's actually going under hood to be fully immersed and themselves into it. So I think a lot of the VR and AR is is pushing the frontier of interactive entertainment and tech from an experiential level. I would say like crypto is doing that from an economic level, right? So it's a two different kind of compartments there. And so on a crypto, sort of economic layer, right? And we think about how can we onboard user without having them to think about, oh, this is crypto, or this is like, how do I use like a wallet and things like that. So right now, a lot of the challenges that, GameFi project face is like, to start playing, you have to, have upfront capital, and that's what, some of the guilds, right, like YGGs of the world, and start becoming these type of infrastructure that, lowers the barrier of entry for these type of games. But then, so there are pockets of infrastructure communities that are starting to enable that. That's why we're seeing play to earn. The widest adoption is actually in Southeast Asia, right? Like in the Philippines, there are actually, I think the heights, there were like millions of users, right? Like and already playing Axie Infinity, because to them it's actually a necessity, right? So I think, and so that's one is like, from the infrastructure side of things, entrepreneurs are starting to come out and think about how do you lower the barriers of that. And then from the game developers themselves, I think I see a lot of developers thinking, how do we lower the barrier to zero, right? Like any games, like, you can just start playing and then leveraging gamification. There there are certain steps you get into the games and start triggering and start really introducing economic systems and crypto within your games, right? So I think that like, a new game design mechanism is also coming up to sort of like lower that barrier.
Yeah, definitely. The lowering of barrier of entry, I think, is super important, and for a couple different sides. And so kind of when thinking about this, we're trying to think about who our audience is. We have traditional gamers on one side that don't like spending money on anything, but will happily spend $60. And then you have crypto purists that are happy to accept any project into the ecosystem. But if it's not completely on chain, it might pose kind of an issue. If it's not innovating, it might pose an issue. And when we're thinking about creating video games, number one thing is always fun, right? And so how do we make sure this entire kind of Venn diagram of users is having fun? How do we kind of use the game as a way to teach gamers about crypto? And similarly, how do we kind of take the folks of crypto that want to play the game actively, or perhaps just want to collect, or just want to be in the market, or just want to wager, and create those different ways for them to play, to then slowly but surely get them kind of hooked to the game, hooked to the community. So now someone might only be a collector, but they're just as important of a part of the gaming community as the person that's grinding all day. And how do you get those cycles to kind of work together? And games have been doing it for a long time, with kind of the escort quests of having to, hey, here's where you bring someone. It's all about teaching. And so that's why we're really excited about this kind of marriage of crypto and gaming, because we're always looking for ways to teach people how to do this, because we're certain once they know it, they're going to have fun, right? Whether it's AR, VR, once they do it, if they don't happen to get sick, as a few people do, they're going to have fun. Once you really understand the blockchain, you're going to see the utility in it. And so how do we do that with games as the medium?
Thank you for your wonderful answers to that question. There were several very key moments and points that the panelists have brought up. And one of them is about lowering the barrier towards playing these games and smoothing that experience of playing, and almost making the players feel like they're not on a particularly different technology platform, while making them feel the additional benefits that new technology brings. So it's a very intricate balance that a lot of these game studios and developers need to maintain. I think in the interest of time, we're also gonna open up the floor for our audience members to ask the panelists any questions. For audience members, feel free to direct any of your questions to any specific panelist, or also just to all three. It's up to you. So if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand, and we'll call you out so you can unmute yourself. Nate, feel free to unmute and ask your question.
Thanks. Hey, everybody. I'm Nate. I was in one of Dr. Barquez's classes a couple of years ago. Thanks for organizing this. I wanted to ask for Mia, or really anyone else on the panel, where do you think the money in play to earn optimally would come from? Like, who do you think is going to pay for people to be playing games in the cryptoverse? Could it be like companies, people? What do you think that might look like?
Yeah, I think eventually it comes down to the holy grail of how do you build something fun that sort of stimulates that consumption behavior in your games, right? And I think and that's literally everyone that I've been talking to. The narrative keeps coming up, and for the past few months I've been meeting a lot of these talented entrepreneurs and developers, talking about how do you really infuse that. And I think a lot of them are in the works, and but it does take some time to make those games, right? So hopefully we'll see them starting to pop up in like a year or so.
Yeah, Nate, I think you brought up a very interesting question. I think this is something we can go into more details with Hans and Andy as well. Like what we've seen in traditional gaming, like 80% of the revenue comes from free-to-play games. And in crypto, there are a lot of examples where we see that people need to have upfront cash, like 700, 800 US dollars in order to start playing the games, and people have to calculate like returns, how many hours should I put into this in order to get my initial money back. So I think we're looking at a convergence between what the traditional gamers are building, what they're looking at, and what the crypto traders are also looking at, because the space itself is very volatile, and it's still like at the time you're playing, you're gambling with your investment. So it's very tricky scenario, I think.
Yeah, and you're seeing a handful of different approaches towards it as well, right? You do have the large entry, something that costs $1,000+ in order to play. But then you see projects like Midnight Society, where they fix it at $50 to be part of their kind of founders pass, very much going towards like traditional gaming. And so what really separates buying an NFT to play a game from buying a hard copy? And what about playing to earn an NFT and then trading it, and that person being able to play, or having one, and how is that different from DLC? So I think we're going to end up trying a bunch of different ways to figure out what works. And I think it's going to be different for different communities. Smaller kind of companies like ours, we can get away with a lot more because we don't have that massive player base that's going to scrutinize everything. If Blizzard came through tomorrow and said things are going to cost $1,000, their forums would go down. That said, it might not be a bad idea. It just is going to get hit with more scrutiny. So smaller companies are going to be able to fail fast. Bigger companies are going to kind of hop on to what's working. But at the end of the day, money's going to change hands. But now you have a way to recoup some of that money instead of going to GameStop and getting $20 for your $60 game. Not to mention all the other things that can pop up on top of that.
Yeah, and I'll add, free to play was a big thing that kind of took some time to really take hold in the game space, but now it's a staple. But I think it took a while for people to understand the value of that and how you can make that work and actually make your game grow exponentially as a result. So we're just needing to figure out what that use case is for crypto. But ideally it's something similar free to play where you give people enough to become invested in the game, and then from there whatever the trajectory is for costs and related to their investment, it'll be a no-brainer because it's a fun game that they're willing to invest in now.
We have some audience members today who are also interested in the investment side of Web3, either through individual investments or institutional investments. So this question is geared for Mia. As an investor at one of the top crypto native VCs in the world, that is Dragonfly, what methods do you implement yourself to judge your own investment decisions from the past?
Yeah, I think about a few things. I mean, there's a lot of the traditional VCs, or not traditional, like all VCs use to evaluate companies. How do you think of the founder, the market, and things like that. So I think with regards to Web3 is I think a lot about like I think being long-term is long-term thinkers for the founders actually an extra important piece of the equation that I value a lot on, given that, as you guys know, crypto is liquid venture, right? As we call it. This primary and the secondary market are closely connected. So, and I think it really takes a founder's strong conviction in something that is so fundamental and to his or her own beliefs, and to really, ride through cycles, right? Because crypto is quite volatile, and sometimes we really see that the markets going crazy, and a lot of capital started pouring in, and then markets dumping. People are like starting to even you can see that in primary company valuations as well. So so I think having that deep conviction and in what they're building is quite crucial, right? And in fact, I think the best companies are built during the bear market, contrary to what we usually think.
Yeah, thank you, Mia. And we have another question for Hans and Andy from more of a game development side. So we have seen a lot of the games on Oculus platform and other VR platforms is sticking with the motion sensing genres they're in, first-person shooters, boxing, and other sports games. And I think another maybe advantage that people might mention about VR and AR headsets is their social, like the social aspect of it, like Meta's demo. People are able to showcase their facial expressions on their avatars. So, and in symmetry, we have seen a lot of success in crypto space where projects have a lot of social halos around the community. So the question to you guys is about the social aspect and how much do you think about it in your product design?
Yeah,
Go ahead, Hans.
Yeah, I'll just start off. We understood how the power of the social aspect. I think it really started to take hold for us when we were diving deep into the social gaming space, and just how just adding that one piece can really drive a lot of your design and how long your game lives past the initial set of playtime that we design around. And on top of that, you're able to kind of piggyback off of what the social aspect brings to the game to also drive new features. So it becomes a nice synergistic thing that kind of allows a game to evolve with the community and go way further than you might have originally intended. So that really solidified that importance for us. So moving forward, just in these other spaces, we're always trying to figure out how to bring that aspect in. And VR is no different, but it's providing a lot of different experiences. Like when we developed Knockout League, it's a boxing game that we initially made to just be a very cartoony punch-out style game, but the knock-on for that was a lot of people were expending a lot of energy playing the game, sweating, losing a lot of weight. So it's just like, hey, like people are exercising a lot just playing the game and not even realizing it. So being able to take that new experience that we're doing in VR and then now couple that with the social side, now you can start to tap into group exercises, group competitions, and really grow that space. I mean, you can see Andy's Peloton in his background. That was another version of inserting social to something that people are used to, and then it becoming a big phenomenon because everybody is able to experience this thing together and kind of push each other through leaderboards and things like that. So yeah, we're gonna continue to try to figure out how we can include that as much as we can.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of speaking to that I think a lot of it just comes down to expanding what it means to game, to play, to be a part of the community, to exercise. You see people hopping in VR kind of rooms and role playing. Big thing that's going on right now. People stream themselves role playing with other people streaming themselves role playing. So you kind of really get deep into it. But a big part of it is that community aspect. You see it a lot in crypto right now. We're all going to make it. I was early. What we think is a little bit more worth thinking about is creating these I was here moments. Someone beat a boss, your friend beat a boss. I used to watch my friends play video games and I would kind of share in their victories. And so how do we create that experience so that you get something when it happens and that affects how you play going forward, how your friends play going forward, or how your entire community plays. And being able to kind of have that as an NFT is kind of the tip of the iceberg there. But how do you create these community goals and these community moments to take social to a level beyond kind of the spam and scam of the 2010s? So yeah, super exciting stuff.
Awesome. In the interest of time today, those are all the questions we can ask in this time. Our panels are indeed very busy. Just really quickly before we end the event, is there any way that people should stay in touch with you or follow you on Twitter or anything like that? So students can ask any further questions.
Yeah, I could drop my Twitter handle here. I don't really use Twitter. But yeah, feel free to DM me or anything. If you guys have companies that are looking to start or just generally look advice, I'm happy to be here.
Yep, I'll do the same.
Cool. Yeah. Well,
Amazing.
Twitter handle. Feel free to reach out. Always interested to talk about this sort of stuff.
Amazing. Thank you so much to all of our three guests for taking all your time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We really appreciate it, and we hope we can have you in person sometime. That would be really cool.
Thank you, Richard and Jeff and everyone for having me. And yeah, I hope to see you guys in person.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah,
Thank you.
appreciate it,
For having
guys.
us.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for your insights, Mia.
Thanks. Bye.